Let's explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right, welcome to this week's Breaking History, episode 40. I'm very, very happy. We got a lot to talk about today. Once again, as always, Gordon, I'm very. We were chatting a little bit before the show yesterday, last night, about some of the topics and some of the points of strategy, and the thing that I think came up as very clear in both of our minds is obviously the need to demystify what has been the nature of the game for the past, let's say we could say several millennia, but let's narrow it down a little bit and say the last century or so. You shared with me a lot of the some very important insights regarding some of the breaking developments within the Middle East zone per se that I think is useful. Someone's calling me, bad timing, decline. Okay. Sorry. So yeah, you were sharing with me some of your insights regarding the extension of the conflict in Syria, in Israel, Gaza, as an aspect of the Ukraine war with NATO, as sort of the glue that ties this together. NATO is going to come up a lot in our conversation because there's a lot more going on even before NATO was created and before the CIA was created and before the Five Eyes were created, that has to really be understood in order to properly get around this beast, to understand how to navigate through the storms that they're creating for us to fall into. So I don't know, Gordon, I don't know, how would you like to start it? But I was thinking that your insight on some of the Middle East developments was very interesting. So how about we go with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Good to see everybody. Hope everyone's having a great day. So for the past week, I've been writing for the Badlands Brief. There's been a lot of stuff happening in the Middle East. So just coincidentally, there's been a lot for me to write about. So, developing these takes for each of these stories and just tracking, which I was already tracking a lot of this stuff anyway, but it's just interesting watching this all play out. So where we are right now is we have everyone understands, or most people have heard about the Iran-Israel situation, where Israel attacked, or somebody attacked a Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps building in Syria, in Damascus, killing several Iranian military personnel, including a commander. And then Iran vowed revenge for that. Israel, the CIA came out and said that Iran's about to attack Israel. This was last week, within the next 48 hours. And the widespread speculation or the response to that on X and other social media platforms was that everyone assumed, well, that just means the CIA is about to attack Israel, which is fantastic that we've reached that point, that everyone understands how this all works. That makes me very proud of the truth community and just the movement at large. But that hasn't happened. Iran has not really attacked Israel, not overtly, not in the ways that we're expecting. There have been things happening in Iran. 2 days ago, they lost internet, and the speculation was that was a cyber attack from Israel. Israel has effectively taken responsibility for the previous attack in Damascus. Although Iran responded to that and saying, look, we know it was Israel, but we also know it was the United States. We hold the United States responsible as well as Israel, because without the United States, there would be no, Israel wouldn't be able to wage kinetic war the way that they are, without the backing of the U.S. I think everyone kind of gets that. So we also have, from months back in December, Putin announced that they were going to start flying helicopter patrols across the Golan Heights. So that would be, let me go ahead and share my screen so I think everyone appreciates when I share maps. I think maps make things a little easier to discuss. So sorry, hold for processing. We got, so the Russians started flying helicopter patrols back sometime in December along the Golan Heights. And we are looking, let me find one of my good maps, my good Middle East maps. Man, I thought I had a better map here, but anyway, so they are flying. The Golan Heights is about right here. Damascus is right here. The Golan Heights is about right here in between. It's the territory in between Israel and Syria, where you have that Israel took from Syria during the 6-Day War in 1967. And so they've occupied the Golan Heights. Syria claims it's their territory, and basically it's just being occupied by Israel and claimed by Israel. So Russia was flying helicopter patrols back and forth along the border of the Golan Heights in Syria, vowing to shoot anything down. The Russian military is in Syria and has been in Syria since 2012, protecting Assad, protecting the Syrian government, protecting effectively the Syrian people from the aggression of not just Israel, but NATO, the Kurds, Turkey. There's multiple forces, ISIS, but you have multiple forces that are attacking and have been attacking Syria. And because of that, Syria's been really carved up. It's been carved up into little pieces, and only about half of it now is under the control of the Syrian government. And really, I see what's happening, the Israeli-Syria thing, that's really becoming the powder keg that could really potentially kick off a larger regional conflict and then parlay it into World War III. I see that as an extension, a parallel extension of the Ukraine-Russia conflict, because you have NATO basically backing Israel, NATO and Israel. You can think of whenever they show the maps of Syria, they represent the United States, the Israel and NATO, the territory they possess in Syria, as like the same thing. So all the map makers could like conflate the U.S., NATO, and Israel because they are basically the same thing. They're fighting the Syrians and the Russians, and you have the Russians fighting the Ukrainians in Ukraine. Now you also have ISIS. We've talked about this before, but the U.S. was able to recruit ISIS fighters from the Middle East to go to Ukraine to fight the Russians, which is a very odd development, but it's not really that odd if you understand that ISIS was created by the CIA. Putin just came out. I wrote a take on this morning in today's brief. Putin just came out and is basically charging the United States, specifically Burisma and the Biden family, with funding terrorism and being behind the attack in Russia, which was purportedly ISIS, but I think we really understand that it was really Ukraine and the CIA. And then you also have, as I've shared on X for months now, you have this really weird relationship, not really that weird if you've been watching the show, between the Azov Battalion, which is not just a neo-Nazi group. I mean, as even Steve Bannon is coming out now and talking about how the Azov Battalion is actually just a Hitler-worshipping group of Nazis. They are direct.
It's about time.
Yeah, direct descendant of like the Third Reich, basically. A successor, spiritual successor. So the fact that the Azov Battalion fighters, going back to 2018, there are MSM articles about the Azov Battalion being in Israel, being warmly welcomed and celebrated by Bibi Netanyahu's government, and also being in Gaza fighting with the IDF, because the IDF, has been losing a lot of soldiers. They need more replacements, and so they've been bringing in the Azov Battalion to fight with them. So you have the Azov Battalion fighting in Ukraine against Russia. You have Azov Battalion fighting in Gaza with Israel. You have ISIS fighting in Ukraine against Russia. You have ISIS in Syria fighting against Russia in Syria. So you have this it's basically NATO against Russia.
Yeah.
In both Ukraine and Syria. And that's really what's going to kick off World War III, because then when you consider that Iran, their close relationship in alliance with Russia and China, if they go and attack Iran, that is also an attack basically on a key Russian ally. And there's a take that I wrote yesterday for the brief. This really great article from the Cradle, where they talked about how Iran's military strategy basically is a fifth generation warfare. Rather than taking the kinetic route, they're slow boiling the frog basically and allowing Israel to destroy itself by destroying its own credibility on the world stage, and then basically expecting the world to come in and slap down Israel, which I do think is probably going to happen because they really don't seem to be slowing down their aggression. So a very, very, very brilliant strategy if you're an Iranian leader and your goal is to take down Israel or take down Bibi Netanyahu's government. That's a brilliant strategy, is to not engage in kinetic conflict, but just more like a regular warfare, psychological warfare, that kind of thing. And then allow Israel to engage in kinetic warfare. And it's kind of like chess versus checkers.
Yeah, and it definitely puts Iran unambiguously on the correct, like on the right side morally of the conflict as well, by withholding your desires for revenge, the eye for an eye reflex that often has gotten us into so much trouble. By withholding that and letting your enemy just showcase that the virtue that they're signaling is actually a fraud and that they are the aggressors. It puts the moral positioning within that conflict into a much more unambiguous tone, which I really liked. And the reversal of the boiling frog analogy, which we've often seen used to describe how we're being screwed. I liked always repurposing that from the standpoint of fighting evil. So that's an interesting and very, I think, insightful thing. And I remember reading seeing a meme that many people here have probably seen it, featuring Xi Jinping. And the little meme was saying Xi Jinping's new war policy to destroy the United States has been revealed. Sit back and wait for the U.S. to destroy itself, or to collapse. That's it, under its own corruption. And it's in many ways, you're dealing with an enemy which is overbloated. It is getting desperate and sloppy. It was arrogant. It thought that there were going to be certain outcomes, whether it was in the Ukraine gambit earlier on. We believed that Russia was going to collapse by this point early on. We believed that the Russian economy was going to be able to be destroyed by sanctions, by isolating Russia, as was immediately the planned outcome of the Russian special military operation. And here we are 2 years later. Russia has come out. Even the IMF is sounding like would have to be like Kremlin propaganda, because the IMF is even writing reports saying, well, actually, the stats are showing that Russia is now the strongest economy in all of Europe and the 5th strongest economy in the world. And, a lot of the NATO files, Jens Stoltenberg has had to admit that that the Russians have completely turned over and rebuilt or revamped their entire military. They have more solidified connections with their allies, like Iran, like China, like India, Pakistan. Like, there's so many nations which are buying Russian oil that are then selling it back to Europe, because the Europeans still need oil, but they're now having to go through many middlemen and paying like triple what they would have been paying if they just had Nord Stream 1 or 2. So that's still happening, despite the fact that the vice grips are being pushed down, and there isn't an effort by the same technocrats that want to destroy Russia and China and India and all of those countries, still, despite that, are committed ideologically to shutting down industrial civilization, and thus shutting down farm production, nitrogen fertilizers, industrial output, energy, hydrocarbon energy. They're still going hard on that. So how are they going to actually win that war with nations that are pro-industrial, pro-development, when they're committed to the opposite? All they have is their nuclear warheads, as far as I could see it right now. So it does create a degree of self-contradictory hecticness that I think, for people who are a little bit more poised inside of decision-making circles within Iran, within other parts of Asia, they're able to sort of just take a step back and, like you said, recognize that this thing is self-cannibalizing. And I hope you're right. I mean, I was getting worried at first. There was some belligerent messaging coming out of some of the circles of Iran, indicating a slap in the face or some form of retaliation into Israel, which is a trap. I mean, if they go for that, there's a whole sequence of events that will be triggered that is not dissimilar from the sort of thing we saw in the buildup of World War I, which didn't seem like it could possibly. Nobody thought World War I could have been possible in 1913, 1914. No way. There was, and that's actually going to touch on something we're going to, maybe not at the moment, but I do have a few slides to showcase something else that David Cameron recently said, as he wrote in the Telegraph, April 7th, that the world is safer for a renewed entente. And the subcaption here is, the British Foreign Secretary and British Foreign Minister celebrate 120 years of cooperation between our two countries. This is insane. This is totally insane. Because you for those who don't know who might be listening, the Entente Cordiale between France and England was a British scheme that was exactly what I was referring to. That was what made World War One function as a war, was this special secret relationship. Because originally nobody knew that England, through Edward Albert, King Edward VII, who was sort of this grand strategist, the uncle of Kaiser Wilhelm, the uncle of Nicholas II. He had his brood situated everywhere, and he was more than happy to sacrifice his own brood. It's a very inbred beast. And he had organized for years with high-level officials in the British Empire to organize a secret special relationship with a mutual security pact, whereby, if one member gets attacked, both have to go to war. And that was started with France and England, and then it expanded to a stupid Russia that also joined in secret. Germany had no idea that this was baking and broiling and growing in the sidelines, but this is directly tied to the collective security pact that was later created and baked into NATO, which is also why, as you just pointed out, the entire NATO secret sauce, both within the war against Russia on the Ukraine front, as well as within Russia through the proxy system situation in the Middle East, and also against Iran, which in many ways is moving forward. Although, as you pointed out, Iran isn't falling for it, but it's still there as an intention. The thing is this collective security pact. If one member nation of NATO gets in a conflict, and there's 31 member nations, then everybody there's going to be a legal obligation to invoke some form of mutual security processing, which is where this whole World War situation really can get out of hand, where nations who don't want anything to do with conflict, because you signed on to this mutual security pact, you are going to be expected to do that. So yeah, that's just something I want to throw out. And I've got a bunch of slides and stuff going through the roundtable movement, which we can get at later. But I don't know if that's something you want to hit at right now, or if you'd rather expand a little bit more on some of your considerations on.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into those slides, because I think that's going to be really, really helpful. Real quick, I'll just what you just were talking about. It's fascinating that David Cameron, we have some interesting developments right now that others on Badlands have been talking about as well, where all these world leaders are meeting with Trump. So you have Viktor Orban comes to Mar-a-Lago and brings his attaché, and it's like the diplomats are meeting with the diplomats. It looks like, I mean, the way they had the table set up in the pictures, it's like Trump's team was meeting with Viktor Orban's team, almost like Trump was still president. You had Trump speaking with MBS on the phone at that narrative deployment. They didn't specify when this phone call occurred, but it sounded, they heavily implied that it was very recent. I read about this in the brief last week, that the day before that narrative deployment was put out, that news story was put out, Jake Sullivan was supposed to be flying to Riyadh to meet with MBS. He then, the next day, the same day that this story comes out, cancels that trip because of broken ribs, which is a very odd reason to cancel a trip. I mean, broken ribs you can't treat. You just persevere until they heal. So get on the plane, sit in the plane seat, fly to Riyadh, and take your meeting. But anyway, so you have the Biden administration basically not meeting with, arguably the most important, I mean, I would say arguably the most important Muslim leader in the world, in the Middle East right now. Instead, Trump is meeting with this guy on the phone, and then David Cameron goes to meet with Trump instead of meeting with Biden. And when he's asked about it, he says, yeah, I always go meet with the candidates, the prospective candidates in a presidential election. Although I think Chris Paul went and looked and did not find that David Cameron met with Joe Biden in 2020. So, that's a very interesting development. Getting back though to the French English British agreement and their relationship, we've talked about the Pico-Sykes agreement. I will share my screen real quick just so we can show you the map. This is the official map from the Pico-Sykes agreement at the end of World War I, which really set up the 20th century and what we're dealing with right now. Set up everything that we're dealing with right now. What Assad's dealing with, what MBS is dealing with, and everything happening in the Middle East has to do with the Pico-Sykes Agreement. And the Pico-Sykes Agreement was about basically betraying the Hashemites, betraying the Arabs, and carving up the northern Arabian region between Britain and France. Russia was given a little sliver, like around Constantinople, around Istanbul, probably because they wanted they wanted to protect their interest and access to the Mediterranean Sea. They were allies with Britain and France during both world wars. But really, the big reason that Britain wanted to bring France in, even though Britain was really the one working with the Arabs during the conflict, is because they wanted to keep Russia, by having both of those militaries, both of those countries present in this region, that would deter Russia from trying to come in and impede on that. And that was really the big concern. So you have A and B. A is the area that the French were going to control, which is Syria and Lebanon. B became the British mandate, the British area, which was Iraq, Jordan, which they ended up giving the Hashemites later, and then Palestine. And so that really is how the colonization, like the colonial era of the 20th century, played out. You had Syria, and Palestine being under French protection, and Iraq and Palestine being under British protection, and really by extension Jordan as well. And as Colonel Towner Watkins pointed out last week, when this was done, Kurdistan is right here. So this is Kurdistan, this region that I'm circling right here. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but they intentionally carved up Kurdistan and kept the Kurds out of their considerations out of consideration. And as she was arguing, and I think she's right, I think they did that intentionally. And multiple reasons why you would do that. You don't want to give them their own country because they already have a hegemony, like ethnically, culturally, and everything. You give them their own country, and they are then going to be able to hit the ground running and really fend for themselves. If you carve them up and put them in four different countries, they're fractured and they can't really unite politically. And that can be used to your advantage later when it comes to creating destabilizing events, false flags, that sort of thing. Operation Gladio.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this ties directly into what I was mentioning earlier regarding the role of King Edward VII, right? As being one of the key initiators, who was head of an organization called the Club of the Isles. And this is one of the top-down think tanks of the empire. The Prince of Wales is always the head of this thing, and that's what he was, the Prince of Wales. And he had mastered the art of psychological profiling using the most advanced Anglo-Venetian techniques. He had all the weak spots of Kaiser, who liked the pomp, his little nephew who loved the pomp and the regalia of the imperial sort of ritual system, had a big ego, just like Nicholas II, who had a superstitious occultist proclivity as well. Not a bad guy, but super mushy on the mysticism. That's why they had a lot of their agents through the Okhrana as well, encircling, sort of flooding the zone to control the environment and the perceptions of Tsar Nicholas II. They're the ones who were whispering in the ear also of the Kaiser, saying that, look, Otto von Bismarck, who's actually a Lincoln-admiring real patriot of Germany, Otto von Bismarck wants to steal your sunshine, fire him. He's trying to be a new emperor. And so he actually did. He fired one of the best, most competent, not just generals, but he was the chancellor. He was the grand strategist who unified Germany and made
unified Germany, and hit brilliantly, by the way. I mean, the three big moves they did was the invasion of Austria, which was very quick little battle. A quick little fight with France over Alsace-Lorraine, which is like the region between France and Germany, which has been fought over for centuries. And then in Denmark, taking the Holstein-Schleswig, which is where every single dairy cow in the world, black and white dairy cow in the world, comes from, that region. There, it's called a Holstein cow. So very, very important region.
So strategic. And he applied the full-blown American system, protective tariff, national banking, internal improvements, rail development, industrial development, schools, trade schools, and working also to create alliances with Russia. That was what Bismarck was entirely based upon, as well as all the way to the Ottoman Empire, where he had allies who recognized that he was able to organize to recognize the need for the Berlin to Baghdad railway. that was von Bismarck's brainchild the whole time, that was going to tie into broader networks of rail with nation builders of Asia. The Russians were going to help with that. So you had that had to be destroyed. King Edward VII played a key role in that. Also the same thing, getting Sergei Witte, the Lincoln admirer of Russia, who was advising and was the first prime minister of Russia, getting him fired by Nicholas II, who again had all of these theosophical connected freaks and feudalists who were all around him, advising him about what the ghosts are telling him to do, and his dead dog and stuff is advising him to do. And he actually did it and started making a lot of bad decisions that led into a bunch of things that didn't need to happen, especially in regards to suppression of the serfs, or the serfs had been released. But there was a lot of anarchistic fervor to create these controlled revolutionary color revolutions of the 1890s in Russia, as everywhere. A lot of these more inculcated anarchists were deployed to kill people like Alexander II, McKinley. Many leaders of the world were deployed by these networks, but there was an actual tumult. So he clamped down with an iron fist, instead of going with what Witte was saying, which was, let's actually create a constitution and give people real freedom and progress. That was the Witte solution to this type of foreign-induced anarchy, is like, let's create economic hope and optimism for people. So Witte was ousted, was fired. Instead, they went for the heavy hand. And that then gave a reason for the sort of pseudo Black Lives Matter movements in Russia to then just double down, triple down. And some of the key organizers for that involve people like Alexander Helfand on the left, Trotsky in the middle, who are both working very closely with Jabotinsky. Trotsky was sending his recruits from Russia, from the anarchist networks there, to Jabotinsky, who was in the midst of preparing the groundwork for a fascist Jewish legion that was going to be brought online very soon. So they were all working together. Parvis was also one of the main bankrollers and gun runners for the Young Turks as far as creating the Balkan War. So you have this guy, Alexander. Yeah, and all of them are assets of the Mazzini networks, especially Parvis, via Greece. Where there's a big Freemasonic outlet there tied to the P1 Lodge of Mazzini. Trotsky, we all know his story, right? And Jabotinsky. Jabotinsky is the guy who was the direct boss of Bibi Netanyahu's father, who was the personal secretary for for Jabotinsky, who saw himself as...
I did not know that.
Oh, yeah.
Bibi Netanyahu's father was the secretary for... Really?
Personal secretary for...
Wow.
Yeah, Jabotinsky, the guy who was running the terrorist brigades, slaughtering Arab towns, and what was it called? The Haganah. And
that makes a lot of sense. That explains a lot.
Yeah. And Edward VII, just to tie this all together, after he gets this whole configuration of secret alliances with mutual security, collective security pacts called the Entente Cordiale, the cordial entente agreement, whatever. He's the same guy who founded the Palestinian Exploration Fund and the Quator Coronati Lodge, the Freemasonic explorer, what was it called? The Exploration Lodge of the British United Grand Lodge, which it had one of its key purposes to chart out the terrain of the Middle East. One, look for Solomon's Temple location so that you could prepare the groundwork to rebuild it. The other thing was to also profile all of the different tribes and Bedouins and other things, and find an excuse to just get intelligence operatives masquerading as engineers and archaeologists on the ground, little Indiana Jones types or Lawrence of Arabia types, to then
Lawrence of Arabia, Gertrude Bell, Jack St. Philby.
Yeah,
like people like that.
Just send them all in, map it out, and then create the framework in which what you just showed to the audience would be possible in 1915 with the Sykes-Picot. That was the consequence of decades of Quattro Coronati Lodge work within that entire zone. So it's all like wrapping itself together in a very interesting way. Yeah.
Well, and what's interesting is I've read T. Lawrence's book, like The Seven Pillars and which is like his autobiography of like his experience in Arabia. And the general sense that I get is it really does seem like some of these guys who were, like you said, like intelligence assets, who were like archaeologists who were there, but they were gathering intel and sharing their intel back with home. A lot of them had this passion for the region that was cultivated by, as far as I could tell, this like curated kind of culture of like literature and everything that became really popular in London and also like on the East Coast of America and like throughout America. Of they call them like Arabists, right? They called them Islamicists, like people who, like Westerners who wanted to go to the desert and like study it, and they like romanticized it and thought it was like very like intriguing, like the mystique of the Orient, like that kind of stuff. Like go to Africa, Heart of Darkness kind of stuff, like explore the unknown, the adventure of it. And I think a lot of these people, like as young children, bought into this idea. Like Gertrude Bell would be an example, T.E. Lawrence would be an example, and it almost seemed like, to an extent, I could be wrong about this, that T.E. Lawrence was almost like a useful idiot. Like he thought he was actually helping the Hashemites, and at the same time, it seemed like he kind of knew in the back of his mind, I think they're about to get betrayed. They even told him, like, we know y'all are probably going to betray us, but like, what choice do we have? We got to get rid of the Ottomans. And then he seemed to have some sort of like depression after that all that went down. It's just interesting how they were able to, using like literature and books and stuff and like education and these schools they set up everywhere, where like the children of the elite would basically go to these schools, like Gertrude Bell be an example, go to these schools and be almost indoctrinated to become an adventurer and go to Iran and go to Arabia and go to Iraq to explore it on behalf of the British government. Yeah,
absolutely. No, I think that's a very, very good point. And that's part of the conditioning, in fact. And that comes into the, if you think about it, during this time as well, this idea of exploring, of part of the training, the British Empire has always understood, all empires understand, that you can't maintain an empire by having administrators and civil servants and managers who are just book trained, right? If you want a competent empire to be able to endure, you need to have your managers, or at least upper level managers on some level, who are not simply ivory tower, but actually have real world experience on the ground in different parts of the world. So that's where, if you look at it early on in this reconfiguration of the British Empire, you had what's known as Milner's Kindergarten. This is a grouping of young sociopathic Oxford men who were brought in to the cauldrons of war of South Africa in 1898, and they emerged bankrolled by the funds of Cecil Rhodes when Cecil Rhodes was still alive. And when Cecil Rhodes died in 1902, his massive amount of wealth, he had a whole country he just created, right? He created De Beers, Lonerho, like the biggest mining cartels and diamond companies that are still influential to this day, raping Africa, were created by Cecil Rhodes. He made himself his own country called Rhodesia. So he had a lot of money. And I don't know if it was necessarily his. I think that he was himself probably a bit of a George Soros style cardboard cutout.
Jeffrey Epstein type.
Yeah, I think so. I think he had more powerful families like the Cecil family, the Cavendish family behind him, who goes much further back to the highest echelons of the Venetian party in Britain. That's probably
Cavendish, by the way, was a founding family of the East India Company.
There you go. Yeah, and the Cecil family was there for centuries as well. And Lord Balfour, he's the nephew of Lord Cecil, who's the guy. He was the Prime Minister of Britain during the Civil War for a period for about 2 years, and he was the one who really came out heavily supporting the Confederate South and saying, like the Lincoln's Union, we can't work with their natural enemy, the Confederate South, with their genteel attitudes, and we have a natural affinity for the Confederates. They like they can identify with having slaves do all your work for you. So the British appreciated that ethic. That Cecil patronized this whole thing, and this is what gave rise to what's known as the Round Table movement. This is what these guys were all the first generation leaders of the Round Table, which is a network of think tanks spread out in the British Commonwealth, with the key think tank being the London Round Table movement. And again, these guys got their experience overseeing the creation of concentration camps, murdering civilians, doing things that no human should ever do. And some of these experiences you can only get in times of war. So the British, part of why I think that they do wars, on the one hand, obviously geopolitical, divide to conquer, that's useful to keep your victims fighting. But on a deeper level, there's I think an aspect of it that requires an initiatory process of putting those who are expected to be the managers of the empire through an initiation process. Kind of like Marlon Brando, as you pointed out in Apocalypse Now, right? Going into the thick and things of Vietnam and just like cutting off heads and doing things that no human should ever do or experience. And then that people who survive that experience will come out as like, Michael Aquino, the colonel who oversaw bringing in Psy Wars into NATO and into the U.S. military via Fort Bragg, and the PSYOPs battalions that he was overseeing as the head of the Temple of Set, because he was a Vietnam murderer as part of these Vietnam mercenaries, and that's where he got his Luciferian sort of passions. And then he became the second in command of Anton LaVey, and then became the guy who was putting into motion Zbigniew Brzezinski and Samuel P. Huntington's Revolution in Military Affairs. That's what his job was, with General Stubblebine overseeing that whole thing in the 80s, right?
And both those guys, by the way, Anton LaVey and Aquino are both Satanists, right? I mean, aren't they like Satanists? They're both like openly Satanists, like they were Satanists, proud Satanists.
Yes. Yes. That's what got the Church of Satan to be brought into the military as an official branch of a officially recognized religion. That was Michael Aquino's baby. That's why we have that in our U.S. military now, is the recognition of the Church of Satan as a respectable thing. So that's the guy who oversaw this thing. And again, the Boer War, and I brought this up just to get across that this guy Philip Kerr became Lord Lothian, who became also the ambassador to the United States before and during World War II. Very, very high level people. All of them played key roles with Fabians in setting up the League of Nations. And Philip Kerr said something important where he was commenting to Lord Lionel Curtis, another member of the Milner's Kindergarten. Milner was the sort of minister of the colonies, one of the main architects of the League of Nations as the solution to the First World War, as well as at the same time as the League of Nations was being created, you had Chatham House, the Royal Institute for International Affairs, as the new name for the Round Table Movement. It was still called the Round Table Movement, but now they had a new official name. Oh, hold on, I gotta hide this. There you go, Temple of Set, which was the Chatham House, and within an American branch was set up called the Council on Foreign Relations. A Canadian branch was also set up too, and an Australian and a New Zealand branch were set up too, all to just organize this basically what Cecil Rhodes called for in his will. And what you got there is that's the Temple of Set. If people didn't believe what was just said, that's Michael Aquino more recently with his Lilith wife.
Check out how he wears his eyebrows. He like waxes his eyebrow, like he like puts like wax or something in his eyebrows to give him like little pointy horns. This is how he always wore his eyebrows. His wife's name is Lilith, who those who aren't really familiar with what that name is, that's like the Bible story of that was like Adam's first wife, who like became like a demon or something, and grew wings and flew away, something like that. Rose is in the chat. Rose will know the story of Lilith. She'll explain it in the chat, and I'll relay it.
Yeah, it's part of the Gnostic Gospels.
Yeah, the Gnostic Gospels, exactly. Yeah,
the Kabbalists love this stuff, and yeah, that's right. So his eyebrows, his eyebrows are too much. He takes himself so seriously.
Yeah. And then the other one is here's Anton LaVey. This is a book by Anton LaVey, or a poster, I'm sorry. It's for sale on Amazon. And this is the dude. This is like the dude that we were just talking about. I mean, check this out. This dude is like a hardcore Satanist. And he's, him and Aquino are doing this in the military.
Yeah. And if you actually look at a lot of the key guys who are part of this thing, a lot of them are directly tied to Jacques Vallée, Hal Puthoff, Colonel John Shannon, they're all working with the Esalen Institute. in Big Sur, California, which is doing work as a branch with Stanford Research Institute on the what's called the Mind Wars or the Stargate projects that Stubblebean was overseeing, using like child psychic spies that they're trying to like cultivate and groom. A lot of abuse, a lot of sex abuse is going on there. A lot of child murders are going on. A lot of psychedelic drugs and babies is being used. This is like MK Ultra.
Well, it's like that show. What's that show that was really popular on Netflix? Stranger Things. Stranger Things,
exactly
right? Like that movie's or that show's based on what you just described. Like they actually tried to cultivate like psychological powers by like using like trauma and abuse. Because you're right, when you traumatize people, you put them in a state where they can be indoctrinated, be controlled, like whatever.
Yeah, you can compartmentalize their minds more effectively. They're more suggestible, but there's also like you can induce certain photographic memory patterns. You could access all of a sudden parts of your brain that normal human beings don't need to access, but that could be then induced in the Monarch, Project Monarch type of operation that also involves sensory deprivation chambers, a lot of drugs, a lot of trauma, a lot of abuse, and then a lot of rewards. So it's a lot of like withhold, hurt, and then provide massive reward, and then do it all over again. So you just destroy people's ability to have any faith in their own judgment. They have no faith in their own mind. They've compartmentalized their mind to take traumatic experiences and make a different personality that could then feasibly be triggered to come alive in a Manchurian Candidate type of way. So they were doing this, overseen by all of these Satanists. A lot of them are working with the Scientologists, by the way. A lot of them are high-level OT7, like Hal Puthoff or Ingo Swann Scientologists, which is itself an outgrowth of Aleister Crowley's Ordo Templi Orientis, OT. It's not a coincidence that L. Ron Hubbard, Crowley's disciple, the B666, chose the OT lingo as far as his Eleusinian mystery rituals of 7 rites that would then be repackaged for his new alien religion, that a lot of these who would go into the higher esoteric order, and I agree, most Scientologists have no clue, just like most Freemasons have no clue what the game is about. But those who are high up, they know. And they're always involved with Satanists working on MK Ultra Mind Wars projects, and that are overseeing things like Desert Storm, all of these insane wars that the U.S. got into, the overseeing of murder of American people in 9/11. A lot of these were people who were processed through this indoctrination thing in the 70s and the 80s, and then were put to work as generals, as key leads, or as people in intelligence to oversee the carrying out of such acts as the murdering of 3,000 Americans on 9/11 and a variety of other things ever since then. So big segue to get at the Boer War. This is all in my mind like a template that was first really done in a modern way in the Boer War by the Milner Kindergarten Group. And the League of Nations emergence is so important. And it's done with the counterpoint that Philip Kerr, who I just showed in this previous image, he's setting the groundwork that World War I is happening, but they're frustrated because they expect a certain role or behavior from the United States, and they're not getting it because America still has an anti-imperial tradition. And I love this quote. It's such a good quote from 2 roundtable leaders. And again, they're all bugging each other and stuff. It's all weird, but that's the Oxford way. He says here, there is a fundamentally different concept in regards to this question between Great Britain and the United States as to the necessity of civilized control over politically backward peoples. The inhabitants of Africa and parts of Asia have proved unable to govern themselves because they were quite unable to withstand the demoralizing influences that is, and he's referring here to their desire for modernization and independence, to which they were subjected in some civilized countries, so that the intervention of a European power is necessary in order to protect them from those influences. So he's talking about Britain's role in protecting these backward peoples from the corrupting influences of the desire to industrialize and modernize, which is like what the Berlin to Baghdad Railway was threatening to do. He's like, we have to protect them from themselves and their stupid desires to have industry. And the American view is quite different. The extent of this work after the war, sometimes known as the white man's burden, will be so vast that it will never be accomplished at all unless it is shared. Yet America not only has no conception of this aspect of the problem, but has been led to believe that the assumption of this kind of responsibility is iniquitous imperialism. They take an attitude towards the problem of world government exactly analogous to the one they earlier took towards the problem of the world war. That is, they were isolationists. They didn't want to be involved. If they are slow in learning, we shall be condemned to a period of strained relations between the various parts of the English-speaking world. We must get into the heads of Canadians and Americans that a share in the burden of the world government is just as great and glorious a responsibility as participation in the war.
That is an amazing quote. You need to send me that slide. I need to post that on like all social media platforms. That is an amazing quote.
I love it. I love that
yeah.
quote. Let's maybe go for a couple of commercials and then.
Oh yeah. I didn't even realize what time it was. Yeah,
I know. I always check it.
Can you do the first two? I don't have the copy pulled up. I'm gonna grab some water real quick.
I'll do the first two are actually all pre-records, made our life easier. So just sit back. The second two I'll do afterwards.
Sweet.
So first one, My Pillow.
I'm excited to announce we're having a huge My Pillow spring sale, and here's a few examples. Buy one of our My Pillow 2.0s, you get another My Pillow 2.0 absolutely free. Made with cooling technology, the best pillow ever just got even better. And this just in, 9 brand new colors and styles of our Percale bed sheets. They're made with the finest long staple cotton, and now you can save 50% or more. That's as low as $24.98. And for the first time this year, I'm bringing you our My Slippers and Sandals for as low as $25 a pair. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get your MyPillow 2.0s. Buy one, get one free. Percale sheets as low as $24.98. My Slippers and Sandals as low as $25 a pair. And for a limited time, when you order $75 or more, your entire order ships absolutely free.
All right, I got Good Ranchers coming up.
T-bone,
good,
chicken,
good,
bacon,
good,
salmon,
good,
ground beef,
good,
ribeye,
good,
ranchers,
good,
ranchers.
Good Ranchers delivers the best meat and seafood America has to offer. And we ship it straight to your door from real farms and ranches right here in the USA. So whether it's beef, chicken, pork, or seafood, you know it's gonna be
Ranchers, ranchers.
That's a good form of psychological propaganda that I approve of. It's going to be my loop in my head for a while. You're on mute, by the way.
Yeah, rookie move. Yes, great. That was awesome. Everyone, please hit the thumbs up. I always forget to say that to like the very end of the show, so I might as well say it in the middle. Please hit the thumbs up if you're enjoying the conversation. Also, I saw Rose mention in the chat. Yeah, the Lilith thing is not from the Bible, which is why I'm not 100% familiar with it. It's like agnostic. It's like what the Satanists believe, basically.
It's in the Gnostic scriptures that I think were like counterfeit scriptures created in like the late 2nd century as part of this syncretization of Babylonian witchcraft, Kabbalism, Zoroastrianism, that with a little pseudo-Christian sort of flavoring to infiltrate Christianity and create something much more conducive to the cult of Isis and Mithra. That were a little pissed off that this new thing was in town, acting like a bit of a disruptive influence. So they're trying to, if you can't destroy it from without, you do what the British Empire did, and you create a 5th column within America and act like that's America that everybody should come to hate and fear. That will destroy and self-cannibalize America from within, right? So that's what they did for Christianity too, and the whole Lilith thing is. Yeah,
that's basically what Operation Gladio is. It's like the best way to defeat a revolution is to lead it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, on this point, like a lot of the techniques were being honed by the Rhodes scholars, and I think it's important to keep in mind that we've got the Roundtable movement funded by the Rhodes Trust, this massive fortune overseen by people like George Parkins, leading Canadian oligarch from the what's called the Family Compact. For those who don't know, in Canada, our oligarchy in Canada are the traders from the U.S. colonies, from the 13 colonies, who basically wanted to stay loyal to Britain, and Britain gave them sanctuary in British territories, and then that they just acquired from the French, because they just beat the French in the 7 Years' War, so they got Quebec as a British-controlled zone. So they're like, okay, we'll give you sanctuary, but that then involves creating a secondary local oligarchy, and they became known by the 1820s as the Family Compact. They didn't disappear after the 1840s, which is what Canadians are told. They're like, oh, that was just a moment of corruption. Then they disappeared. No, the same families today. That's what George Parkins was, who lectured Milner, who inspired Milner in Oxford to become an imperialist. He's the one who inspired Rhodes, Cecil Rhodes. And so, the Rhodes Trust bankrolled this network of think tanks to coordinate action, kind of like the Bilderberger Group. And again, the Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR, set up in 1921, was also the British branch inside of America, what Hillary Clinton calls the mothership. It's not American. The other aspect were the new Church of the British Empire. I got a little quote here by Cecil Rhodes. Actually, it's probably useful. Actually, before I do that, so it's called the Rhodes Scholars. The Rhodes Scholarship Trust was set up. About 8,000 Americans have been indoctrinated by this thing that follows the mandate that Cecil Rhodes laid out, calling for a Jesuit-modeled constitution and a new secret society founded upon the Church of the British Empire. That's what he literally calls for. I'm not even verbatim. And he says here in his most important will and testament that is the manifesto for the thing. Why should we not form 1877? Right? Why should we not form a secret society with but one object, the furtherance of the British Empire and the bringing of the whole uncivilized world under British rule, for the recovery of the United States, for the making of the Anglo-Saxon race but one empire, the extension of British rule throughout the world, the perfecting of a system of emigration from the United Kingdom and of colonization by British subjects of all lands wherein the means of livelihood are attainable by energy, labor, and enterprise, and especially the occupation by British settlers of the entire continent of Africa, the Holy Land, the valley of the Euphrates, the islands of Cyprus and Candia, the whole of South America, the islands of the Pacific not heretofore possessed by Great Britain, the whole of the Malay Archipelago, the seaboard of China and Japan, the ultimate recovery, this is the key one, the ultimate recovery of the United States of America as an integral part of the British Empire, the consolidation of the whole empire, the inauguration of a system of colonial representation in the imperial parliament, which may tend to weld together the disjointed members of the empire, as Cecil Rhodes. So you got to keep in mind, all of these guys are high priests of the Church of the British Empire, and they're the ones overseeing the new Oxford Rhodes Scholars, who would interface very closely with the other think tank, the other pro-eugenics globalist think tank of the Fabian Society. But one would be in the London School of Economics, the other one would be in Oxford, but both would work together as sort of the hands of the empire, right? To scratch away and make it happen again.
Man, before we move on, I have to real quick highlight a few things. Number one, Rhodes Scholars include Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. They're both Rhodes Scholars.
No, not Obama's a Fabian. He's a London School of
Economics. He's a Fabian. He's a Fabian. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I feel like he's been like misattributed then to being a Rhodes Scholar.
It's because he had so many Rhodes Scholars around him.
Okay.
Just like Biden, right? Biden's like full of Rhodes Scholars everywhere. Jake Sullivan, all that stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah. And then real quick, let me share my screen. This guy. So it's funny that this is all Oxford, because I 2 years ago kind of came across when the whole FTX thing became a thing, and I started digging into FTX. So this guy, William McCaskill, who's 37 years old, he's been described by Bill Gates as being like the young version of Bill Gates. He reminds me of myself at his age. He said 23 years ago, 2001, they started this thing called the Philosophy School at Oxford. Now, they have been teaching philosophy at Oxford for 900 years. So, but they created this new school called the Philosophy School at Oxford. And this guy is deeply involved in it now. And basically it's all of these NGOs, the Center for Effective Altruism. They write all the white papers for the World Economic Forum. They, how they're going to take over the world with the climate change agenda and all that. This guy like in America, because I think he operates a lot of it out of America. He goes to the Northeast, plucks this kid out of school, takes him to the West Coast. They form this company. They start playing the stock market in Japan and then create this company, FTX. That was SBF that he took out of school. So this is the dude who literally took SBF out of school and then started FTX with him. He was one of the executives who had to resign. And it was all done through the Center for Effective Altruism out of Oxford. And Oxford, I would describe the new, the philosophy school at Oxford as the new Frankfurt School. Like that's how it seems to be for me. But yeah, William McCaskill, very, very important person in like the climate green, fake altruism. Like, oh, we're going to save the world by enslaving it movement.
Interesting. I did not. I hate these people. These little slavish house slaves. I hate
dude
them.
if you go look at the connections, like I created like a whole like mind map of him. Like he is connected to all the people. Like you'll see all the names, Klaus Schwab, like all that stuff. It's crazy how connected all this stuff is.
It's so dirty. Could have been something. I'm sure he was a great baby.
He's probably a great kid until they MK Ultra'd him or whatever.
Yeah, they have a science of corruption. They work it. They know how to do it. So yeah, here, just to run back just quickly here, we're talking about the League of Nations, right? So the League of Nations was the solution run by the Round Table movement. Now, keep in mind, in 1916, there was a coup d'état in England, overthrowing the government of Herbert Asquith and installing Lloyd George, the guy who was going to be the pro-Nazi prime minister in the 30s. That Lloyd George, he was first prime minister when he overthrew, and this is all being done by Lord Milner. And there's a book called A Very British Coup, and there's a lot of articles written about this, how Lord Milner was able to orchestrate with Northcliffe and others and Beaverbrook this overthrow of the government so that he could be in control. Not that the other government of Asquith was good, I'm not saying that, but he just wanted to be in the steering committee position to shape the solutions to the Great War. And there's a little picture here from a U.S. periodical. The Americans were not cooperative. Both Republican at the time and Democrat alike. A lot of like patriots were rallying together to disrupt the League of Nations. That's articles. So that's Uncle Sam's hands being tied by the League of Nations, as it says in the bandwidth there. And you got, foreign nations, European nations. The League is the key to destroy the sovereignty. And Article 16 of the League of Nations Covenant is the precursor to the NATO Collective Security Pact, Article 5. That's what it was. But it didn't work back then in 1920 or 1919. But Article 16 says very clearly, should any member of the League resort to war, it shall ipso facto be deemed to have committed an act of war against all other members of the League, which hereby undertake immediately to subject it to the severance of all trade, so massive sanctions or financial relations, the prohibition of all intercourse between their nationals and the nationals of the covenant-breaking state, and the prevention of all financial, commercial, or personal intercourse between the nationals and the covenant-breaking state, whether member of the League or not. And Article 10 is on war, on collective security itself. So Article 10 and 16 are the two things that involve collective binding agreements that supersede or trump your sovereignty status as a sovereign nation state. Now, this was destroyed by a bunch of nationalists, real patriots, both American President Warren Harding, who disrupted this thing. He basically didn't allow the U.S. to sign on to anything and continued to make bilateral agreements with Austria, with China, with Russia, outside of the League's authority. Sun Yat-sen had a huge power base in China and was making sure that that China would not cooperate as well. Foreign Minister Walter Rathenau of Germany, also key guy, working very closely with these networks of pro-nation builders. You had people in Russia at the time who were going to war with the Trotskyists. So there was a battle over like who would win in the wake of the Russian Revolution. Which faction? Would it be the Trotsky faction I just showed here earlier? Or would it be something a little bit more nationalistic that didn't want to have global revolution? So all of these people ended up dying very quickly, but they do an effective job disrupting the League of Nations. It fails. And, Warren Harding, he's poisoned, I think. They say it was oysters or something. but he dies 1923. Sun Yat-sen dies in 25. Walter Rathenau is shot by a cell of assassins called the Organisation Konsul in Germany that kills 300 German politicians during that same dense period, and they become the paramilitary group for the Nazis after they're legalized formally by the Kaiser or the Chancellor. But the League is the key, and that's the solution to the Great War. But the Great War didn't have to happen. As we mentioned earlier, it's the 120th anniversary of the Entente Cordiale that David Cameron is trying to revive with Macron, and he's trying to get the U.S. into it. They're trying so hard to get the U.S. to be in it. So this was Kaiser Wilhelm speaking to Tsar Nicholas II in the wake of World War I, August 1914, where he's just such a loser, and he finally realizes, I screwed up so badly, and the war is inevitable. And he's saying here, England, Russia, and France have agreed among themselves to take the Austro-Serbian conflict. That's the murder of Archduke Ferdinand by another organization called the Black Hand, run by occult networks tied to British intelligence. So they kill a guy in Austria, and then all of a sudden that triggers, it's a Serbian terrorist group. So then that triggers a conflict between Austrians and Serbia. And there's these mutual security pacts between Austria and Germany and Serbia and Russia. So
it's basically like a domino. It's like like hitting a domino, and all the dominoes start falling down because of these security pacts everyone has with one another. Now everyone gets sucked into, obligations to fight.
Yeah, it's so baby lala. It's really infantile. But yeah, that's how this works. And so they say, so Wilhelm says they have agreed among themselves to take the Austro-Serbian conflict for an excuse for waging a war of extermination against us. That is the real naked situation, slowly and cleverly set going by Edward VII, and finally brought to a conclusion by George V. So the famous encirclement of Germany has finally become a fact, despite every effort of our politicians and diplomats to prevent it. The net has been suddenly thrown over our head, and England sneeringly reaps the most brilliant success of her persistently prosecuted, purely anti-German world policy, against which we have proved ourselves helpless. While she twists the noose of our political and economic destruction out of our fidelity to Austria, as we squirm isolated in the net, a great achievement which arouses the admiration of even him who is about to be destroyed as its result. Edward VII is stronger after his death than I am, who am still alive. I think this is what Iran is trying not to fall into, right? A lot of the Arab states right now are trying to take the learn from Kaiser Wilhelm lesson, because he didn't have to. I really don't think he had to go in and militarily back up Austria if it got into a war with Serbia or Russia. He didn't have to do any of those things.
Yeah.
But he did, from weird senses of arrogance, honor, whatever, bending to his constituency. I don't know. But, you could see it. There's a lot of people in the Arab world right now who are saying, look, why are they're putting a lot of pressure on the leaders of their governments, whether in Saudi Arabia, in Turkey, in Egypt, or in anywhere, right? Iran, why are we not retaliating and destroying the devils who are killing all of these people? And it's painful to see what's being done in the Gaza, but the trap has been laid. If people do this, they will walk into that trap.
Yep.
That burned the earth and almost created one world government under a eugenics religion back 100 years ago. Actually, it's almost about 100 years, right? A little over that. So there's all of these things. And again, the people, these figures are heroes. The first president of China, Sun Yat-sen, is the first president of China, a Christian, Confucian, first president of China, of the Republic, right? Who's today seen as a great hero in China mainland, and ironically Taiwan as well. He had a very, very different idea than what the Green Gang warlords wanted to do, who were much more favorable to what became the thing that took over his Kuomintang party under Chiang Kai-shek, who was a pro-fascist asset for the CIA. Sun Yat-sen wouldn't have been happy. But this is like a real big deal. And if you look at it, one of the key guys in this whole League of Nations propaganda campaign is a Canadian. The Canadians come up in strange ways. Escott Reed, who is a Rhodes Scholar, a co-founder of the Canadian Fabian Society called the League of Social Reconstruction. That's him with our Oxford Prime Minister Michael Pearson, Lester B. Pearson, and S. Scott Reed. So we're saying here that it's the 75th anniversary of NATO today, or this week. It was the 75th anniversary. Not really quite true, actually. The first real initiation of NATO, which was the repurposing, the resalvaging of the League of Nations Covenant, Article 10 and 16, collective security, that gets rid of sovereignty of nation status, which is protected in the UN Charter, which is why it's not the same thing to say that the UN Charter is the League of Nations Covenant, because unlike the League, the UN under Franklin Roosevelt's mandate made sure that the sovereignty of nation states was sacred. You couldn't, that's the principle of international law. Then other things were added into it to subvert it from within.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting because that's definitely how they teach it in American public school. Like when I was in public school, they definitely taught it as the League of Nations was like the progenitor to the UN. And I mean, I guess there's, on the surface, you could if you don't really understand the nuance of it, you could think that. But the League of Nations was not liked. Like people looked at the League of Nations and said, that is a bad idea. We are not doing that. A lot of people said that was a terrible idea, and for the reason that you just said, because it took away nation sovereignty.
Yeah, and it also enshrined the UN Security Council as a determining body that would. It was intentionally designed to bring together representatives of the most powerful nations who would be induced otherwise to go to war with each other. So like China, Russia, the US, Britain were all part of the the body that would then determine what would or would not make a viable war possible. Everybody had to sign off on something if there was going to be a conflict. That's a very important thing, because if you combine that with the sovereignty of nation status, and then all of a sudden the Cold War would have been impossible to create the Iron Curtain. You couldn't have artificially created that had that happened. That's why the NATO had to be created, was to bypass the UN Security Council and to create something that was designed to destroy Russia and China, without Russia and China having any say in what was being done, or that would prevent a unilateral war policy like we've done, in Yugoslavia. No votes. We just went and rules-based ordered them back to the Stone Age, killing 30,000 civilians, or we did it with Gaddafi or so many other times. So the thing with S. Scott Reed is he was the chair of the League of Nations Committee in Canada. Like I said, co-founder of the Roundtable Movement. He was co-founder of the Fabian Society, and he was the first executive secretary of the Canadian Chatham House, the Canadian Council on Foreign Relations, otherwise known as. It was called the Canadian, anyway, too many names. But he said here in 1947, I recommend, and he is an anti-American. He hates America, right? This is the thing to keep in mind. All of these British guys who are calling for what I'm about to call for, or what he's about to say, hate America. So it's ironic that he's about to say what he's saying. This Roosevelt has just died. The U.S. is being reconquered by their Rhodes Scholarship, fifth columnists. They're like, all of the agencies are being brought under the influence of the deep state. And he's saying now, all of a sudden, now that the Cold War has begun, I recommend that the countries of the North Atlantic band together under the leadership of the United States to form a new regional security organization to deter Soviet expansion. The states of the Western world are not debarred from the Charter of the United Nations or by Soviet membership in the United Nations from creating new international political institutions to maintain peace. Nothing in the Charter precludes the existence of regional political arrangements or agencies, provided that they are consistent with the purposes and principles of the UN. And these regional agencies are entitled to take measures of collective self-defense against armed attack until the Security Council has acted. So right there, he's referring to something that was slipped in 2 weeks after FDR died. Articles 52 to 56 of the UN Charter were slipped in the San Francisco conference by Count Coudenhove Kalergi, who at that time was brought in by the CFR and was in charge of overseeing the crafting of the UN Charter and the addition of these articles that he made a high priority for 2 years. My wife goes through this in great detail in the Kalergi chapters in her book, The Empire in Which the Black Sun Never Set. Lots of quotes like, So all of a sudden, the Article 52 allows for regional organizations, and I think Article 54 does too. So now all of a sudden that you could have that's what makes the the European Union possible. What Clarity called his Pan Europa. That's what made NATO then possible, which wasn't possible if the original charter had been actually followed. So now this anti-American Rhodes Scholar, Fabian Society creator wants all of a sudden the U.S. that he hates to lead the world. Why? Got to think about what did Cecil Rhodes say about his objective of recapturing the U.S. and making it an integral part of the empire. And another guy who hates America, wants to destroy it, is Bertrand Russell. Oh, yeah.
By the way, before you go to him, what you just described, like the idea of North America forming its own little like security council, that's like the vision that like Agenda 2030 has, where they're like, all right, these regions, not like the multipolar world order that like Putin talks about and Xi talk about. That's different. That's like nations actually acting in their own best interests and everyone having like bilateral agreements, like individual bilateral agreements. This is the opposite of that. This is like collectivism. Like instead of America deciding what's best for America, North America, Mexico, Canada, America decides what's best for America, decides what's best for Canada, decides what's best for Mexico. And it basically undermines the sovereignty, like you just said, of individual nation states. And this is what they wanted everywhere.
Yeah, dude. No, I'm so happy you made that discernment, that nuanced clarification, because yeah, you've got a battle of two. Like you could say, the American colonies kind of created a Pan America originally in 1776. They could have individually have done their own thing, but they chose to unite together, recognizing that we're stronger together than if we were divided and broken up, right? So that's a legitimate idea of pan something based upon the real greater general welfare, the real freedom, not the type from the World Economic Forum lingo of Orwellianism, the real thing. So in that sense, power is not intrinsically a bad thing if it's done according to natural law, as we saw with Nasser and Nasser's idea of pan-Arabism, which had a lot of Saudis were on board with that. A lot of Egyptians were obviously Egyptians. A lot of Syrians were on board with his idea, which was it wasn't the idea of Coudenhove Kalergi. There's a different pan-Arabism of the Nazis, of Haj Amin, that also wanted to unify the Arab world, but around fascist policies of racism, bigotry, other things that would then create a local jurisdictional control of fascism under the control of an supranational banker's unelected dictatorship. And that's the oligarchical thing. So the multipolar alliance, not the same thing as what we're talking about here with Kalergi. Very good point. You brought that up because people get so confused about this. It's crazy. And Bertrand Russell, even before that. So this is 2 years before NATO was officially created. A year before that, he writes The Bomb in Civilization. This guy is one of the key Cambridge apostles, along with Alfred North Whitehead and Lord Maynard Keynes. The apostles are the key. That's the nerve center of planning of the creative part of the empire. The Rhodes Scholars are more the actors, the people, the doers, who will lift things and do things and infiltrate things, just like the Fabians will do things on the left-hand, right-hand path. The upper echelons, the creative managers, you got to go to something that gets you at least closer, is the Cambridge apostles. So Lord Bertrand Russell, multi-generational family, high level, and hates America. There's so many quotes of this guy talking about how he despises America. But he's known as a great pacifist. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature. He's a peace lover. That's what he's known for. And he's a great god of philosophy of modern universities for obvious reasons. So he says here, either war or civilization must end. And if it is to be war that ends, there must be an international authority with the sole power to make the new bombs. But I fear that all of this is utopian. If America were more imperialistic, there would be another possibility, less utopian and less desirable, but still preferable to obliteration of civilized life. It would be possible for Americans to use their position of superiority to insist upon the disarmament not only in Germany and Japan, but everywhere except the United States, or at any rate, in every country not prepared to enter into a close military alliance with the United States. During the next few years, this policy should be enforced. If 1 or 2 wars were necessary, they would be brief and would soon end in decisive American victory. I don't know if he's talking about the Vietnam War here, because that did not end. That was not brief, and it didn't end with American victory. In this way, a new League of Nations could be formed under American leadership, and the peace of the world could be securely established. But I fear that respect for international justice would stop Washington from adopting this policy. So, fascinating. Like, this guy, 1946 now. League of Nations is the NATO was created in 1949. Now he's saying this 3 years earlier, and again, another anti-American, pro-British imperialist calling for American leadership. What is he talking about, right? It's clear.
Yeah. Well, and so like the metaphor, the analogy that I would use for what he just described is basically you had America emerge, especially like after World War One, at the end of, especially, I'm sorry, at the end of World War II, like throughout World War II, America really had to establish itself as the apex predator in the geopolitical ecosystem. I mean, we were the dire wolf, basically, that could not be even threatened. There was no natural predator for America at that point. And so if you are a British, oligarch, and remember, like in Britain, they have the House of Lords and the House of Commons. So the hatred for America really comes from their contempt for the commoners, because they view all Americans as commoners, basically, maybe save for a few elites that they may even have blood relations to. But that's really what it is. It's like, we're going to take this dire wolf, this apex predator, we're going to domesticate it, we're going to put a leash on it, a muzzle on it, and we're going to basically break its spirit and then make it our killing machine. And that's really what they did.
That's exactly. Very well said. Very well said. Do you want to do a couple of commercials?
Yes. Let's go ahead and do the next ad read.
Okay. Wait, did I? Am I doing it or am you? Or you?
You said you would, but I'm happy to do it.
Oh, okay. Here, let me just get it up. So what's the next one? It's Beamish Metalworks. That's okay. Coming up. Okay. Beamish Metalworks. Celebrate love and family with a unique and personalized gift from Beamish. Whether it's a wedding, anniversary, birthday, housewarming, or just because, you're sure to please with a custom piece of metal art from Beamish Metalworks. Beamish crafts personalized, timeless masterpieces that will last a lifetime. And that is a perfect way to add a touch of elegance and personalization to any home. Honor your family's heritage with Beamish monograms. Showcase a family name anywhere inside or outside the home to add a touch of elegance and showcase your personal style. Choose from a variety of colors, sizes, and prices that's perfect for your space. With Beamish Metalworks, the possibilities are truly endless. Badlanders, don't miss out on your very own Badlands media sign and new Badlands license plate from Beamish Metalworks. Visit Beamish Metalworks today at badlandsmedia.tv/metal art and use promo code Badlands for free shipping. That's badlandsmedia.tv/metal art, promo codes Badlands.
And I can do the other one if you want. AirTag. I have it pulled up. So
thank you.
If you want to hit the video.
Yep.
Tired of the endless cycle of buying and tossing those paper tree air fresheners? Enter AeroTags, where their design was to craft a solution to this very problem. AeroTags are the first ever laser engraved rescindable car air fresheners made right here in the USA. Born in the makerspace of the Cleveland Public Library, AeroTags is not just a business, it's a revolution, a testament to the American dream. They are not just about freshening your space, but also about doing it better with a commitment to longevity, aesthetics, and sustainability. AeroTags are designed to last longer, look great, and reduce waste, replacing those fleeting scents with something you can count on. Don't forget to grab your Badlands Media AeroTag, now available. Visit badlandsmedia.tv/AeroTags, that's AROTAGS, and use promo code Badlands for 10% off your order. That's badlandsmedia.tv/AeroTags, promo code Badlands.
Sweet. Good job. All right. So yeah, like we're obviously at a place right now where the consequences of a lot of past decisions are coming up to bite, and it's good to be aware of the nature of these biting creatures. One thing I'll also just point out here is that Bertrand Russell, S. Scott Reed, and company were as they were saying what they were saying, preparing the groundwork for what became League of Nations Part 2, aka NATO, and the more mutant United Nations that they were in the midst of taking control of. There was also things like the CIA was being created, right? 1947 September was when the CIA was being configured. Allen Dulles was asked to like lay out what an intelligence agency should be and do, and he was like, look, we can, as you pointed out, he even said, we can fund it ourselves, because he knew where certain fascist gold lived, and that was attractive to a lot of stupid congressmen who sanctioned the creation of this thing. And you had the Five Eyes was created with the UK USA Signals Agreement by Churchill, announced the same day that the Anglo-American Special Relationship was created in 1946, March. I want to say 6th, but March 1946, Churchill declares the Iron Curtain, establishes the Anglo-American Special Relationship, and at the same day signs on to the UK USA Signals Agreement that ties the NSA and the GCHQ together with the CIA and MI6, that then becomes a global dragnet, expanding to the entire Commonwealth and beyond, which is today, that's the heart of the entire surveillance state. That's 1946. You have the what's called the National Security Council 75 that's passed around this exact same time, basically saying to in the United States, that Britain protecting the British Empire after World War II has become a top priority for American self-interest, with the logic that is, if the British Empire's assets from their empire now are permitted to be liberated, they will join with communist nations like Russia and China, which we cannot allow. And so we have to protect the British Empire. So this is where America became, as you just pointed out, this attack dog monster on a leash for the British, to then use their military power and economic power to be enforcers for empire, while Britain was able to just be the brains behind the brawn, as Churchill called it. That's actually what Churchill called it. He's like, America will be the brawn and we will be the brains of the New World Order. That was friggin' Churchill himself. He just said it.
Yeah.
Until to the day, we don't get what killed Kennedy. What were these friggin' Nazis running NATO? Like, that we hired. We gave all of the Heusinger and Spiegel and Steinhoff and all of these high-level SS Nazi killers were all given jobs running NATO for the next decades. And now we wonder, why are the Azov battalions like, whoa, why are there these weird Azovs like worshiping like Hitler today? Isn't that a weird anomaly? And it's, yeah, they're obviously incubated. It's clearly a branch of NATO. It's like,
yeah, exactly. It's like if you accept the shallow framing of, the MSM and like modern academics. And I've been saying recently, it's like anyone who's trying to talk about history and trying to educate people about like history, if they are not willing to talk about the intelligence agencies, then that should give you a huge pause. If they're not talking about that, like we talked about last week, if they're not talking about the intelligence agencies and the role they played in shaping the 20th century, then they are either woefully ignorant and unqualified to be like talking about this stuff, or they have nefarious motives, because it's so obvious how like this stuff is involved. And it's like, to the point last night, Badlands Story Hour, Burning Bright and Chris Paul did Argo, the movie Argo. And so they were talking about like the Iranian hostage crisis and like how Ben Affleck and Hollywood, were trying, it was like, it was like a CIA like hero worship. Like, and that's what they always do. They always like, look how awesome the CIA is. The CIA is altruistic. They're heroes. And then they also made the Hollywood guys heroes too. It's like Hollywood's heroes. Like and there's even like a line, like the whole movie, they're sitting there like basically laughing in our faces and mocking us. Like a high-ranking member of whatever, like the intelligence community says, "Are you trying to tell me that right now at this very moment there is a Hollywood studio that's funded directly by the CIA?" And it's like, that is the biggest middle finger to the entire audience when they say something like that. And it's just so obvious. It's so obvious what they're doing. And by the way, World War I, we were talking about World War I and what started World War I. Nobody wanted to go into World War I. Like, nobody was like, it was silent. It was quiet interest. It was military industrial, like what would become the military industrial complex. The robber barons who had industrialized and basically created these factories that were pumping out artillery equipment and munitions and bandages and all medical supplies and all that stuff. They needed a demand for all that stuff. They needed to utilize it, and they wanted to expand their their industry and drive innovation. And so the only way to get people really on board, because after World War I started, America wanted nothing to do with it, isolationism. And so, all right, well, we're going to sink the Lusitania, was it the Lusitania?
Yeah.
Which was like the British cruise liner that, they were using to smuggle arms from America to Britain, and like 1,800 people are on it. And I think something like 1,100 of them died. A lot of them were Americans. That contributed significantly to us entering the war, because the psychology of Americans was, we need to exact revenge against Germany for sinking the ship.
Yeah.
And then that set the precedent for false flags throughout the 20th century. And that's basically how every war was started since then.
You ever see this book before?
No. What is that? Secret Agent 666.
Gotta read this book. This is coming in really handy. I'm doing currently a 12-part Tesla series, a Nikola Tesla series on my Substack. I'm on part 3 so far. Part 2 heavily relied on this book. That's a picture of the Lusitania over there sinking. That's obviously the Beast 666, Aleister Crowley. And it's on Aleister Crowley, British Intelligence and the Occult, going through the entire Crowley network of British intelligence operatives who are typically members also of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and his Argentum or Astrum or something. There's this whole grouping of Satanists that are tied to British intelligence. Many of them are acting like they're pro-German intelligence, giving information from America, because America is seen as neutral. So that's an espionage Byzantine ground of intrigue. Neutral America is like where you've got good and bad espionage going. You got like Irish patriots who are trying to create like the Irish Free State movement, who are enemies of the League of Nations, who are operating in America. You have freedom fighters from India operating in America. Obviously a lot of Germans, but a lot of like Druidic, Irish Druidic occultists also in America, Hindu tantric, Kali assassins operating in America, and they're all working with Crowley. And Crowley somehow got the trust of the highest echelons of the German military. The key German chief of staff is von Moltke, whose personal guru is Rudolf Steiner, actually, which is also very weird since there is a connection on a few levels to that one. But Crowley, in this book by Richard Spence, gets the point across that Crowley is a key figure in the sinking of the Lusitania, getting information that there is war munitions being transported on this passenger vessel, breaking thus the neutrality agreement. And he got that information somehow to the German high command. And it was true. There was munitions placed on that boat. Why did they do that? They wanted the thing to blow, and they needed the Germans to know that was happening to try to turn Americans, like what happened after 9/11, into a pro-war society that didn't want to have anything to do with it. And it didn't work that well, because this was 1915, and it took another 2 years to finally get pressure going for the Americans to support that. But Crowley is everywhere. And I got to say, if people read my my Occult Nikola Tesla series, part 2, Tesla and Tesla's best friend, who's a Satanist called George Sylvester Virake, play a key role with Tesla's tower, it seems, in Long Island, the Wardenclyffe Tower, at getting that information to the Germans, which is why Franklin Roosevelt, when he was heading the Office of Naval Intelligence and during World War I, demanded that this thing be destroyed, because there were these Satanists in Long Island all over the place, which is weird. So that's an interesting part of our history that you're not going to get in high school. That's fascinating, dude. We're gonna have to do an episode once you get further down this Tesla series. We're gonna have to do an episode on Tesla for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's mind-blowing stuff. It might have to be multi-part, like different aspects of it, because I feel like he probably touches a lot of different nodes, I bet, of stuff that we talk about. Yeah, there's a lot of data points. Yeah, they're being. Yeah. Well, I have a few tweets that I wanted to share. I don't know if there's any more slides that you wanted to go through. No, I'll just say one thing. Somebody in the chat the live chat mentioned Otto Skorzeny, and yeah, like Skorzeny, like if people have listened to Colonel Towner Watkins over the last couple of weeks here on Breaking History, Skorzeny is key in all of this stuff as far as being a Nazi, like Hitler's top Nazi killer, who was put in charge of managing the fascist movements through NATO offices all over the world, training paramilitary groups, the Savak in Iran, and training, paramilitary groups in Syria, even working for the Mossad after the CIA co-created the Mossad. You have Skorzeny and his Nazis providing advice and assistance to the Mossad intelligence that Mossad is then acting upon. They're paying this guy, a Nazi, right?
Yeah. I've shared that that headline. I think maybe I don't know if it was here on Badlands Daily, but I shared that headline of like they were paying a Nazi intelligence officer for intelligence. It's like he was on their payroll. Like you can't make this up, man. And then you mentioned the Savak. So like the movie last night, Argo, they don't talk about any of this, but what started the Iranian Revolution, what got people out of their houses into the street in 1979 was we talked about it before, the Rex Cinema fire. Yeah. Where this now knowing what Colonel Towner Watkins has taught us, has talked about how with Operation Gladiator they would often dress up as the opposition and then go do stuff, because there's a lot of like understanding and conflicting reports about who actually went and barred the doors, poured the jet fuel on the building and lit it on fire. People said that it was the CIA and bad actors like that. Other people said it was the official story was that it was Savak. They said the Savak was the Shah's security force. So that's what got people. So basically, the official narrative was that the Savak, the state police, basically went and burned down this building with 450 people in it. Barred the doors, burned down the building, and that's what got people out in the street demanding a new government, was that act. And so that's a false flag that was probably done like a Grey Wolves Operation Gladio thing, and that led to the Iranian Revolution. At the same time, in November of 1979, the CIA is sending back, and they even mentioned this in the movie, which is hilarious, but they even sent back a report saying we are 100% sure that there are no revolutionary conditions here on the ground in Iran, and like nothing's going to happen. So don't worry about it. Look the other way. Nothing's about to happen here. It's just amazing.
Yeah, no, it's the same formula every single time. They did it for 9/11. It's run by Satanists. There's weird overlaps between Gnostic networks within the Christian world, as well as within the Jewish world, as well as in the Islamic world, that are more than happy to ritualistically kill their own people in order to get certain effects, geopolitical and otherwise, than preserve their own morality and conscience. And we have the same thing with a lot of evidence that the Baphomet worshipping Templars were getting a lot of their rituals from weird Gnostic Sufi secret societies that were already embedded, enshrined inside of the Middle East, that they were interfacing with, doing rituals underground together. You have this global network. This is what people need to keep in mind. There has been a continuous global network of cults, mystery cults, that have certain common qualities, even though the form might be different from the Kali cult of Hindu India, or Babylonian cults of Marduk, or the Apollonian cults, or the Bacchanalian Dionysian cults. There's different forms of Isis and Cybele and Attis, and there's a network. You can list it out on a whiteboard, right? Look at these cults. They all have different features, but there's certain common themes. There's common denominators that one will find amongst all of them, that have also common weaknesses, which those various cultures will also exhibit at times. When society gets better, when we get Renaissance movements in India, in Islam, when you have a Renaissance, an Islamic Renaissance with beautiful explosions of discoveries, literacy, life expectancy increasing, medical, all of the stuff. You got these blasts of peace and cooperation and harmony based on natural law that expresses itself differently, but it's the same thing in different parts of the world. Christian, Jew, Muslim, Hindu, you name it, you see it if you look for it. And you got the evil thing too, like when societies go dark age, when they get corrupted, there's common themes for that too. And this is where I think, we've got this weird synergy going between some of these Zionist Satanists, Muslim Satanists, Christian Satanists, who are all like doing their own thing in opposition to those who want to survive, as we see with like, you know, the multipolar alliance, as far as I see it, is animated generally right now by a force that is very much tied to natural law and a sense of abundance creation, survival, protecting ancient traditions, traditional values, morality. Those are principles animating the thinking, policy making from most of the Eurasian and multipolar alliance member states. We've lost touch with what we once had. So we have it there. The desire is there. I feel it. You feel it. We're interfacing with thousands of people every day who feel it. We see it in the MAGA network, but it's got to be honed. There needs to be a honing of intention.
Yeah. Well, and if like you want to think about like God's plan, if you want to call it something divine, you know, the emergence of this satanic network, this oligarchy, and this unipolar world has really created the demand and stipulated that the response to that be the emergence of what you just described, of this counter group that is based in natural law. And you know, if throughout this whole conflict and process, at the end of all this World War III, which we're doing right now, World War III is a fifth generation information war. If it results in the world being a better place because Russia, China, Iran, all these countries were forced to adopt, or you know, through just natural instinct and organic development, fostered and grew and adopted a altruistic mindset in order to defeat this evil that was obviously not only threatening them but imposing itself on them for centuries or decades. That's a good thing. I mean, that is, in my opinion, that is God's plan. That's why God creates evil. Like, people are like, why is this evil allowed to exist? Because it then creates the demand for good men to come forward and create a better world. And so like that struggle, that balance really is so much of what I think it's all about. I wanted to share this real quick. These are some interesting little developments. Let me, since we are talking about NATO.
Mm-hmm.
So the first is, this is like a 1-minute video. I think it's worth watching. This is what I mentioned at the beginning. I wrote a take on this for the Badlands Brief this morning. Let's just watch this video.
Yeah.
And let me know if the sound is not coming through. Should I read what she's saying? Because this is in Russian.
People, I guess, if people are listening.
Yeah. So I'm going to mute it, and she's speaking in Russian, so I'm going to just read what she's saying. But it's a 1-minute video, so everyone just bear with me. I'm going to read what she's saying for people who are not watching or only listening. Based on the results of an inspection, this is like, all right. Based on the results of an inspection organized in connection with an appeal from a group of state Duma's their Congress, Duma deputies and other persons, the investigative committee of Russia opened a criminal case on the financing of terrorism. It was established that funds received through commercial organizations, in particular the oil and gas company Burisma Holdings operating in Ukraine, have been used in recent years to carry out terrorist acts in the Russian Federation, as well as abroad, in order to eliminate prominent political and public figures and causing economic damage. The investigation, in cooperation with other intelligence services and financial intelligence, is checking the sources of income and further movement of funds in the amount of several million US dollars. The involvement of specific individuals from among government officials of public commercial organizations in Western countries. In addition, through investigative and operational means, connections between the direct perpetrators of terrorist acts and foreign curators, organizers, and sponsors are worked out. And so basically, like, what they're saying is that Burisma Holdings, which is Hunter Biden's company, is laundering money and funding terrorism. Terrorism is being conducted in Russia and other parts of the world. I think they're probably talking about radical Islamic terrorism, but other forms of terrorism as well. This is something that I've speculated potentially happening for a while now. I said I do think that we're going to see a situation ever since October 7th. I said I think we're going to see a situation where maybe MBS or somebody else, maybe like Putin, is going to have the opportunity to step in and say, hey, all these terrorist acts that, you know, the U.S. intelligence and Mossad are telling us we have to start World War III over these terrorist acts. Guess what? They are the ones who are funding it through their shell companies. I just was waiting for this to happen. It finally has happened. It's fantastic. I just want to share this tab real quick. We're not going to watch this video. It's a 10-minute video, but Lavrov is now, he just held a press conference with China. Lavrov is the Russian foreign minister. He was taking questions from journalists in a joint press conference with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, basically saying that NATO is expanding its operations and now operating in the Asia Pacific region, which is insane because NATO stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. They're not supposed to be operating in the Pacific, but they're saying the reason they're doing that is because Russia is in alliance with China. And since Russia is the ultimate enemy of NATO, that's the reason NATO exists. China, by extension, now has to basically become the enemy of NATO because China is working with Russia. So you can see how, like, they're going to use NATO, which, you know, everyone remembers that under Trump, like, Trump was saying we should just pull out of NATO. He's like, why do we even do NATO? No one in NATO pays their fair share. They're supposed to pay whatever 2% of their GDP into NATO. None of them do that. They haven't paid it for years. The United States single-handedly finances the whole thing, which goes back to the whole direwolf analogy. And Trump is like, and by the way, Russia is selling all of you, like Germany specifically, energy. So if Russia is if you're engaged in that kind of commerce and dependency on Germany, you know, for your life, the lifeblood of your civilization, energy, it doesn't make sense that we'd have a defense, like, security council that would be, whose goal basically is to be engaged in nonstop warfare, kinetic and otherwise, against them.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's why they're trying so desperately to try to create different shifting protocols for NATO to sort of deprive a possible incoming Trump presidency from being able to disrupt what the other member states of NATO, or by that I mean the technocrats running NATO, what they want to do. Now, I don't know to what degree they're able to do that. I mean, anybody who really cares about the sovereignty of their country, if you take the Constitution seriously, none of those international agreements mean anything. They're not binding. There's no legal bindingness in any of those things if it is disruptive to the general welfare and the means of being a free and independent sovereign state. That trumps any type of obligation one is told that they should feel based on any legalistic line of argumentation, whether it's NAFTA, which Trump also flushed. And that was fantastic as another example of Trump taking things that took sovereign decision-making power away from the U.S. and its elected bodies and gave it to something that is supranational, tied to the World Trade Organization. And he basically said, no, we're not going to do that. They flushed it and gave the right back to any nation to use protectionism, to participate in the flow of the economy if need be, which was banned by NAFTA. Banned that. No national direction of the economy was allowed under NAFTA. That was all based upon globalization. You know, let the markets decide. Let mergers and acquisitions. Let the private corporations and private banks decide what's best. And speculators who don't care about the real economy. They just want to make money with money, even if the money doesn't exist that they're making money with, because it's based on just either derivatives or unpayable rates of debt that have been bundled and securitized.
Fiat currency, like money that doesn't, like you said, money that doesn't even exist.
Monopoly money. Monopoly money is more valuable.
And that's how you end up in a situation like JP Morgan has $600 billion in outstanding derivatives. No, I'm sorry, 600 trillion. It's not billion. $600 trillion with a T in outstanding derivatives. Yet they only have reported assets of $500 billion, which means 500 billion. So they only have 500 billion in reported assets. Yet they are potentially on the hook. You know, and a derivative is basically like an outstanding, like a bet that's been placed that hasn't been collected yet. And so that doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be forced to pay out 600 trillion, but they could be. But even if they're forced to pay out a tenth of that, that's still $60 trillion. They don't have $60 trillion. They don't even have $60 trillion in assets, like let alone $60 trillion in cash.
What's the
So
entire U.S. GDP? What's the U.S. GDP as a whole? It's like a fraction of that. It's like what are $40 trillion or something like that. It's
let's
not.
look. 25 trillion.
Okay, 25 trillion.
In 2022, it was 25 trillion.
See the fraction, right? That's a fraction of just JP Morgan's.
That's just JP Morgan. Yeah.
Right. Like, oh my God. And that's what we're being told we have to bail out. That's why they call it too big to fail. So we're being told we have to suffer and cut down our life expectancy and other things so that more money can flow into supporting these too big to fails that have failed. I mean, legally, this is the thing. If we're a real nation, you let them fail. That's what was done in with the bank holiday in 1933. You basically 75% of the banks were bankrupt, right? And you shut them down if they serve a viable purpose, like because America has thousands of small banks. A lot of them, you want those banks to be there to provide loans, give to farmers and give credit for an entrepreneur and hold savings of the people. That's fine, but they all adopted the Calvin Coolidge era of deregulation of the 20s, the roaring 20s when people were making money with money, and it was speakeasies and just it was a party. It was a party of easy money, but the industrial index collapsed during the 20s because everybody was making money on speculating and not creating anything real. The bubbles were then easily built up that could then be poked, as all bubbles can be poked. Bubbles are never supposed to be a natural part of any economy. You're supposed to build real things. That's what investment is supposed to be about, not about speculating on a bubble. So then that was then able to then usher in the controlled demolition of the economy that was then given as a solution was fascism. Hey, the Mussolini puts bread on the table of Italy. Don't you want bread on your table? Americans, go fascist. And so that was the way it worked then. It was done again after JFK was killed, and big time with NAFTA and globalization. Just deregulate everything, let money make money, let stupid people be trained to think that economy is all about, buying low, selling dear. That's not what it's about.
Yeah.
But that's what they're told it was about. And then now you can say, okay, well, Glass-Steagall's not there. Franklin Roosevelt put in Glass-Steagall to break up the banks, so you couldn't speculate with people's savings. If you gamble and lose, you lose. With no Glass-Steagall that Bill Clinton Rhodes Scholar took down, all of a sudden the wall is gone, and now you can have these universal banks that are gambling with people's savings that then can hold a gun over the head of the nation, saying, "Hey, if we go down, you go down, so you better print money." And so the Fed prints money, and nobody asked the question.
Well, and the other thing that Clinton did, I think it was 1993, with the Fair Housing Act. So the Fair Housing Act I used to work in real estate. Anyone who's ever bought a house, if you got an FHA loan, that stands for Fair Housing Act, and before the FHA, before Fair Housing Act, you had to have 20%. Like that's what a conventional loan is. If you go to a mortgage lender and you say, I want a conventional loan, they say, all right, we need 20%. Sometimes it's like 21%, but 20% of the value of the house. So for a lot of people, it's like you got to save a lot of money in order to buy a house and put 20% down. Fair Housing Act made it so that the government subsidize, like Fannie Mac, Freddie Mae were created to basically subsidize these loans so that people could just put down 3.5%. So you can just put 3.5% down now. Now you're not allowed to take an FHA loan out to buy a piece of investment property. It has to be owner occupant. You can only get conventional loans for investment property, but you can put 3.5% down. But you can also play games where you can go buy a house with an FHA loan, live there for a couple years, then rent it out, then go buy another house with an FHA loan. So that's what people were doing. People started doing that. And then by 2006, you had people who had no business owning like 5 or 6 different houses playing that game where they had bought like 5 or 6 different houses with FHA loans, and they had tenants paying their mortgage for them. And then basically once the housing crisis started, or once the housing became so affordable, all these people stopped renting from these people. These people were not good they weren't good to make their payments. They weren't making nearly enough money. Like they weren't generating enough income to cover 5 different mortgages. And then they did what was called the subprime stuff, where they were taking, these banks, they package all the loans together, the mortgage together, and they sell them to one another. And so then they started mixing in subprime. Subprime mortgages means somebody who's considered a really high risk like a high risk loan holder, someone who doesn't have like a high income, but and has no business buying the house that they're allowing them to buy. You then mix those mortgages in with the strong mortgages, like the strong buyers. And as soon as those people start defaulting on their mortgage, now the banks that are holding those notes fail and collapse.
Right.
And so that's just one of the many aspects, like the bubbles that converged in 2008 to create the 2008 crisis. But we are right back where we were in 2008 now, and it's bad, man. It's really bad, and there's really no way I don't think you can salvage this fiat system they have. I mean, something has to give one way or another.
Yeah. And it's going to give. I mean, the question is it going to be something that causes a shit ton of damage first and hurts a lot of people, or can we act preventatively on that tsunami coming in by doing certain common sense things that any sovereign nation state can do? We don't have to honor Wall Street's obligations. You can break up the banks. We can restore Glass-Steagall. Like, that's something that it can be done. Even Donald Trump said so early on in 2017. He gave several speeches, and then I think he realized he had to pull back from it because he was I think he was stepping on certain toes too quickly at that point. But calling for the restoration of Glass-Steagall, that needs to be done. If the U.S. is going to be able to survive this thing seriously. Otherwise, there's going to be a period of very intense pain and turmoil. And at that point, all bets are off. Like, how that level of crazy pans out is impossible as far as I see to properly forecast the details, because it's just, you're in another world at that point of like Mad Max, like Mad Max logic. We don't need that.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, did you have any other thoughts, or did you want to jump into rants?
If there's any rants, yeah, let's listen. Let's listen to what the people say.
Yeah, let's do a few rants, and then maybe we'll wrap up with closing thoughts. Cranop 59, $30. Gordon Matt, here's my tuition for quote real history class, end quote. 64-year-old student. Between your show and the Colonel's Gladio series, my mind is blown continuously. LOL. Thanks, Cranop. Appreciate it, man. I don't know if you'll be in Dallas, but if so, I will see you next week. Let's see. And then we have Emerald Dragon 1333, $5. Another awesome episode of Breaking History. I'm finally caught up with all the episodes, and my brain hurts in the best way. This show is where I plan to introduce people to all of Badlands and the truth. Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that. And yes, thank you for watching and hitting the thumbs up. And please, even more important than hitting the thumbs up, please share the links to the show. Try to expand the viewer base. Let's see if we have. All right, I don't see any other rants. Why don't you give your closing thoughts, Matt? I'll see if we have any Badlands boosts.
Well, I guess the parting thoughts should be, from my standpoint, the bad ideas have consequences. We can act upon those consequences before they come to bite us. Too few people in history have acted accordingly and correctly when they could have, and have chosen instead to be tragic. That's what World War I, World War II were all about. People who could have been bigger people, choosing to go along to get along, to take the easy path, to embrace something, or to allow for corruption to spread when they could have stood up even at risk of their health. But they chose to take easier paths, and that never works out in the big run. And now we're at a moment which throughout history we never had before, which is a world with the atom. So now we have atomic power, and that atomic power is a beautiful thing. In the sense that, I mean, with the human mind, we've been able to start understanding subatomic processes and discover certain energy mass relations that, when acted upon with real knowledge, has given us technologies that, for the first time, we can feasibly, within a period of our lifetimes, green deserts of the world with mass desalination, provide durable, long-lasting, high-quality energy to end hunger 10 times over, by providing massive abundance with third, fourth generation nuclear reactors, pebble bed reactors that only the Russians and the Indians have done. Only the Russians and the Indians. We sabotaged, aborted all of those designs back in the 70s. We stopped closing the fuel cycle in order to just bury it. We could have closed it. We could have reprocessed all of our spent fuel, But instead, no, Jimmy Carter and the trilaterals and the depopulation lobby said, no, we want scarcity. We don't want nuclear. We want to have a policy of forever wars around, limited hydrocarbon fuels of the Middle East. And that's what we're gonna like predicate a new game plan in the 70s based upon oil wars, forever oil wars, monopolies, and diminishing returns to get people fighting over diminishing scraps of a pie without thinking about the fact that no, human beings are not the creature that fights over diminishing returns in a closed system. We could be that when we're stupid, but when we're human, we're creating a bigger pie. We're making discoveries of the laws of nature, like the discovery of atomic power, and applying it to make life better for people. When we have an empire, they will not be able to create those discoveries, but they will steal them and repurpose them by making sure that the only application of nuclear is in bombs that can scare the shit out of people and make them and kill them all, frankly, but also induce them to submit to world government and feudalism instead of actually doing what the atom should be doing. So all that to say, we now have that choice. If you look at the energy policies of Eurasia, of Russia, India, China, 78% of the world's nuclear is being built by Russia, India, and China. The desert greening of the earth, the 10% increased biomass that's been created is not because of us. It's because of China and India greening deserts, building dams, building reservoirs, moving mass water diversion projects into deserts like the Gobi, and offering it to other nations too, saying, look, these techniques are not Indian, they're not Chinese, they're for everybody, and they're offering nations of Africa, of the Middle East. We could be taking inspiration from that type of forward-thinking policy, but instead we're not doing our job. So hopefully my remarks here, when I'm saying time to not be tragic, it's to look at the world as it is, look at history as it was, look at the future as it can be, and act accordingly.
Very well said. Yeah, I keep mentioning the brief. I wrote an article or a take yesterday. Basically, there was so much news coming out of the Saudi Foreign Office in one day that I just wrote like a take on all the stuff that was happening. The four things that happened were they hosted the new Palestinian PM Mustafa, which is like a continuation of like the Jake Sullivan, broken rib, Donald Trump phone call narrative. It's like now like the Biden administration and Hamas, because Hamas was very upset that Mustafa had been appointed without them being consulted. And Abbas, his response was, well, you didn't consult us before you attacked on October 7th, so go pound sand, which is great. So basically you have Hamas and the Biden administration being boxed out, and you have Trump and Abbas and Mustafa now working with MBS. And what's also great is that you have Erdogan. We were talking about Erdogan. We were talking about him last week. He's had a lot of like incendiary rhetoric, like threatening Israel, saying, well, they like Turkey has the largest military. We will lead. We'll be the tip of the spear. We will. I think he said at one point, we will come get you in the night. Is like basically our special forces will be upon you while you're asleep. He said some very, very incendiary things, provocative things. He called MBS on this same day and basically was pleading with him and being like, you need to do something to stop this. Like, please, please, please stop the IDF and what they're doing. And so basically that's an indicator that Turkey's not doing anything militarily. And everything is going through MBS, which is what I was hoping we'd see. You also had from that day, UN Security General called about the Mustafa meeting and was, very interested in that. But Pakistan, MBS met with Pakistani leadership. And I've been tracking this for like a month now, because the past month you've had all these Pakistani leaders coming and meeting, not just with Faisal bin Farhan and like the diplomats, but meeting with MBS and talking about like the military, like the head of the military came and met with MBS, which is a weird meeting for him to have. MBS doesn't meet with military leaders normally. So what they announced the other day is that Saudi's already been invested in Pakistan. They've been building dams in Pakistan. They've now pledged $5 billion to build more hydroelectric dams in Pakistan. At the same time, in the same press announcement, it was announced that MBS called India and said, look, this centuries-old conflict, this ancient feud that you have with Pakistan over Jammu and Kashmir, those two regions, has to stop. Like, we got to bring y'all to the table. We got to find peace, and we got to work this out, because we're not going to be able to build this new Middle East that we want if y'all are still fighting over those two regions. So he's playing peacemaker, like in the absence of Donald Trump. It's very, very encouraging, like, to see stuff like that happening. And by the way, the Saudi Peace Initiative, which is the two-state solution, it's the final piece of the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords is all these Arab countries making peace with Israel. The only two countries that were left out were Palestine and Saudi. Right. Part of that is Saudi Arabia getting a nuclear program, which Israel doesn't want, because Israel doesn't want anyone in the Middle East to have a nuclear program. That's why we went and killed Saddam Hussein, was because they were developing a nuclear program. Now you have Bibi Netanyahu saying Iran needs to be taken out because they are developing a nuclear program. Because the assumption is nuclear programs mean nuclear war, but really what nuclear programs mean is nuclear energy, cheap, clean, good energy. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's key.
Yep. So let me we have two boosts. So let me hit those real quick, and then we'll get out of here. The first one is, and thank you for these. And for those who don't know, let me share the screen real quick. A Badlands boost. If you're listening to this, you're not listening to it live. Most of our audience listens to the recording. You can go to badlandsmedia.tv. You come over to the right, click support Badlands, and it takes you to this page. And then you click Badlands boost. And this is kind of like giving a Rumble rant, like anytime, but it will stay forever. Drop down menu, pick what show you want to give. So we have Breaking History, PD Rebel, $100. Thank you. I just finished listening to episode 39. Fantastic show with the Colonel about Operation Gladio. One question I have: do you guys think Gladio's tentacles infiltrated the Troubles in Northern Ireland? I would love to hear your thoughts about that and the Good Friday agreement and all the major players from Clinton and Mitchell and the usual suspects from the region. Thank you. I don't have any intel on that, but I heard you mention Ireland before. Don't know if you know anything about that.
It's something that I'm not comfortable speaking too much about, but definitely the methods of Gladio, you could smell it right all over the IRA, because originally the IRA was the American system of Lincoln Party in Ireland in the 1870s, 1880s. That's where the protective tariff policy, the pro-Lincoln faction, was all around the founders of the IRA first generation. Something began to happen where there was infiltration and radicalization utilizing provocateurs who were embedded within the IRA, turning it more violent, more reactionary, and thus giving an excuse to the British in Northern Ireland to then do crackdowns, kind of like what we've seen with Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood infiltrating more radical operators into Palestine in order to give Netanyahu the excuse to go into the Gaza and to carry out a more heavy hand to purge the area of the people living there. So they like to have more radical elements. And so the idea of what during especially the Cold War we saw from the IRA as far as becoming a more asymmetrical warfare, terrorist, kidnapping, torture operation that was tied to a lot increasingly amounts of organized crime. And a lot of good people were part of it, right? A lot of good people were part of the Republican resistance, but it has the smell of Gladio everywhere. So I don't know if anybody who's watching this has read some good books or some good articles to give us some more mapping of what is definitely the case. And as far as the more recent situation of the 90s and the Clinton thing, I'm not too sure about that period of Irish history so clearly.
Yeah, well, I don't really have anything to add because, like you said, I don't feel comfortable expressing an opinion without really being well read in on it. So I'll just leave it at that. But something that I probably should look into because I am Irish, so I should know a little bit more about my history as it relates to Operation Gladio. Patriotic Globetard. I love that name. $20. I would like to propose that the flat earth theory is a disinformation campaign to make the right appear crazy, much like Nasera is a psyop. People who believe one theory often believe the other. Phil Godlewski is a flat earther, if that means anything. I've heard the excuse that the flat earth theory is irrelevant, so it's not worth the time to research. It is relevant because it divides us and dilutes the message of our movement. Anytime the topic comes up in rants, it's the Globers who get criticized and demeaned. Why does one prominent Badlander get to have so much influence on a topic that has not been vetted? Flat earth gurus are grifters and very good at twisting the truth. The globe was proven centuries ago, long before NASA came into being. NASA lying has nothing to do with the shape of the Earth. NESARA has been researched and debunked. It's time for Badlands media to practice what they preach and do the actual research on flat Earth. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting discussion. I mean, that's not really something that we talk about on this show, like those kind of, that's really more like a baseless conspiracies kind of subject matter. I'll just say that I personally do not subscribe to flat Earth theory. I do find a lot of compelling arguments that flat Earth people make as it relates to NASA and like the lies that like the government has told us. And I do think it's important to separate those two things, to separate the idea that NASA has probably lied to us about many things, and that just because NASA has lied to us does not necessarily mean flat Earth theory is true. Like, I definitely would agree with that logic. For me, the flat Earth thing is a little bit of like a distraction at this point, because whether or not the Earth is flat is kind of irrelevant to the immediate threat that we're dealing with right now, which is why I don't really give a lot of time to it. I'm of the opinion that every debate is worth having. I think anytime we try to silence debates or silence opinions, I think we are becoming the tyrants that we are up against. So if you are sure of your convictions and you are a principled person, you should be comfortable engaging in any debate with anybody on any subject, especially subjects that you're well read on, and you shouldn't be afraid of it. So, if you don't like the flat Earth people, that's fine. But I think disagreement. I said this on a X space that I was on the other night. I think disagreement's a lost art, and I think we need to learn how to disagree with one another while still getting along and cooperating and working together. So that's one subject matter that I think we are going to need to debate. But, it's probably going to be a lot easier to hold that debate once we actually have defeated this enemy, this oligarchy that is basically become a gatekeeper of truth and a gatekeeper of information. Because once we have access to, the classified information as it relates to NASA and other things, flat Earth debates probably won't even be necessary because we can just have disclosure. So I would just look at it that way. I think it's kind of a waste of energy to spend a ton of time debating it right now in this moment.
I'm a round earther. I'm partisan to the round earth approach. But I think what you just said is a good, competent way of addressing that for the time being. And
look, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I will say this, General Quast, who has attended all of our guards, I'll see him next week. He's one of the founders basically of Space Force. He's the guy who convinced Trump. He said he's been trying to get Space Force created since the 80s. The stuff he talks about with like space technology and like the stuff that we're going to do in space, it seems to me like he probably is not a flat earther. So, and Quast seems like a very smart dude. He probably knows a lot of things that we don't. So, I would defer to General Quast when it comes to that kind of stuff, because he knows things that we obviously don't because of his position.
Oh, Gordon, he's just in on the conspiracy. You fool. Jeez, how are you falling for this? Actually, but that's part of my I've noticed that it doesn't really matter what you bring up. Like, there's something that is above logic in a lot of these things. Like I brought up the Eratosthenes. I was fortunate enough some years ago to reproduce the Eratosthenes test. Have you looked? You know what that is?
I do not know what that is.
Eratosthenes is the head librarian of Alexandria, a student of Plato.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of him.
And he's the guy who, in Egypt, was able to calculate the circumference of the Earth within a really, really close degree of error. Like, I mean, he was like
using like triangulation, right? Isn't
basically taking a friend, on the meridian about 20 miles above him. That at the same moment when the Earth was when the sun was at apex, they found a way to coordinate using a giant long stick. Mm-hmm. Actually involved a hole too, but you can basically do this with a big stick, two sticks of the same size, right? That are separated, that at the same time will cause a shadow to be cast. And then you could take the differential of the shadow and calculate what must be the contour of the Earth if that shadow has a certain differential, or if it's the same. If there's no shadow or the same shadow, it means that the angles of the sun's rays are coming at it directly parallel, and thus you could say that the terrain as a whole must be very flat. If there's a differential occurring of the shadow, you could then extrapolate out that differential and make the calculation that Eratosthenes did. That worked to, like I said, a remarkably good effect, and it can be reproduced more easily today than 2,000 years ago because of cell phones. And anyone can do that. And the response I've gotten from a number of people when I would get into these various discussions was that Eratosthenes was part of the Freemasonic conspiracy to remove man from the center of the world, because there's this emotional logic, which I've seen no evidence. I've seen only evidence that Eratosthenes is a spectacular human being who made discoveries. And when we acted upon those discoveries, the universe responded by giving us greater power of action, greater freedom to explore said universe. So we have this reciprocity based on ideas that are true. Kepler's discovery of the harmonic orbits of the Earth around the sun, or of all the planets around the sun, from his New Astronomy in 1619. People can read Kepler's New Astronomy, and he takes you through how there's a musical harmonic ordering principle shaping the elliptical orbits that he also discovered, that is musical. And it's harmonic, and it doesn't reduce man to some secondary feature or some non-relevant feature of the universe. If anything, even though we're not in the center of the universe, it still proves that we can know the harmony that's organizing God's mind that shaped the universe, which is a pretty beautiful thing. And his 3 planetary laws of motion have proven to work really well at making further discoveries. So that's all premised on ideas that the flat Earth groups sort of think that Kepler's part of the conspiracy too, and you shouldn't. And they'll never read Kepler's original works. They'll never do the work because there's a whole set of. I do think that there are intelligence agencies having a bit of a joke at our expense, who are crafting logical arguments that have certain foundational axioms, whether it's the Gesara Nasara thing or a variety of things that that they put out there into the zeitgeist about shape-shifting lizard people. So they'll tell you 98% of those facts that David Icke is talking about might be factually true, but that 2% of shape-shifting lizard people from the 11th dimension sucking your fear energy is what undermines the whole basis of rational development of a resistance movement against the oligarchy. So I am concerned by some of that stuff going on, but I agree with you as well. Like, we shouldn't be fighting in the trenches over these minutia when we have Nazis coming at us. We should fight the Nazis first, and then
exactly. These are debates that I feel like are best left for once the war is won and we're lounging around eating grapes, in the shade. It's like then we'll have the luxury of these kind of debates. As the guy who is trying to bring Christianity and Islam together to find common ground to fight Satan, I would say for now, let's just focus on the common ground. And the common ground that I think that globetards, as we're called, I guess, globe heads and flat earthers can agree on, is that NASA probably has been lying to us about many things. Was did the actual moon landing happen as reported? Probably not. Maybe there was a lot of maybe it was made on a soundstage because they wanted to beat the Russians for morale points or whatever. They're probably holding back technologies and keeping technologies from us and preventing us from going back to the moon. We can agree on that. We can agree that NASA is part of the psyop to control all of us and being gatekeepers. So let's focus on those points of common ground as opposed to what the end game of that debate is. And we can have that debate and flush it all out once we have retaken control of the country and we can get access to more of this sensitive material and data, and we can get out the liars and the disseminators of misinformation.
Amen, brother.
Yeah.
Let's go with that one.
Sweet. All right. Well, we've gone a little bit over 2 hours, which we don't try to do here, but great discussion, great episode. Please hit the thumbs up, everyone. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next week.
Till next week.